Hi everyone, and welcome to this video looking at development dynamics, which is one of the topics on paper one, looking specifically at the role of globalization and transnational corporations. So first of all, we need to kind of understand what globalization is as an overarching term. And globalization basically refers to the process of countries becoming more interconnected. How I would best describe that, or how I refer to that as students, is kind of this idea that the world is becoming smaller. Obviously, we know the world isn't becoming smaller, but the notion of we've got transport, we've got various infrastructure such as the internet, which means years ago, you wanted to get in touch with someone, say in Australia, in the complete other side of the world, you'd need to send them a letter or a postcard or something along those lines. Now it's very, very different because we want to get in touch with someone on the other side of the world. We've got Skype, we've got Facebook, we've got email, where you can quite literally get in touch with people, look at things that have happened recently in terms of working from home and things like that as well. So lots of examples really where the world has become more integrated, and arguably this notion that supports kind of the world becoming smaller, as it were. So that's basically what we've touched upon there. It's a process of the world systems and cultures becoming more integrated. Okay, globalization. Sometimes you may have heard of this idea as well of kind of McDonaldization, whereas anywhere in the world that you go, there's kind of a McDonald's. They look the same. The menu's very, very similar. It could be anywhere in the world, and it feels as it would anywhere else, sort of thing. It takes place because of the movement of money and people across the world. And the process of globalization has been accelerated because of advances in technology and transport. So some of those key things that we talked about a moment ago. So tying into this idea of transnational corporations, then we also need to think about, globalization. We also need to think about transnational corporations. And those are organizations that operate in more than one country. There's some examples on there. Some of them you may know. Some of them, obviously, you may not know. There are a whole host of transnational corporations, or as we sometimes abbreviate it to, TNCs. These are organizations that will operate all over the world. They will invest money into those areas. They will employ a wide range of people. And again, it kind of supports this idea of globalization. If you call up a company in the UK, you may speak to a representative of that company who isn't necessarily working within the UK. So again, further supporting this idea of the world getting smaller, the world shrinking, as it were. So what do transnational corporations then have to do with things such as development? Well, importantly, TNCs, and therefore globalization, is seen as a tool to support development in those developing and emerging countries. So rich companies set up in a developing or emerging country, and they therefore help to stimulate and promote economic development through investment, through jobs, through services, and so on. So it's this idea of top-down development. So this is kind of a little bit of a criticism of some of those TMCs, but it's where organisations and governments plan large-scale projects that don't have input from local people. So you may have heard of bottom-up development strategies. This is very much a top-down strategy. So it does benefit local people, but it isn't necessarily a process or something that local people are involved in. They don't necessarily get a say in this would help us, this wouldn't help us, this is what we want kind of thing. It's just there to sort of serve them, as it were. Many TNCs have agendas, and their strategies may not support the needs or interests of local people. For example, it may be that a particular TMC needs to ensure that workers can get to or from work, so they may invest in public transport. That might not support or help everyone in the local area. It's certainly going to support and help some people in the local area, but not everybody. Again, Shell, for example, not that I'm bad-mouthing any TNC here, Shell will build infrastructure within somewhere like the Niger Delta, for example, that allows them to extract oil and other natural resources. That doesn't help local people who may be struggling to pay their bills, for example. It is purely in their best interest, in that TNC's best interest, and that's where they come under fire a little bit. In many cases, people can be disadvantaged through unintended consequences. So it might be the TNC actually holding their hands up and saying, okay, fair enough, we didn't want this to happen, this wasn't our agenda, but it has happened. Again, it might be environmental damage, it might be displacing people from their homes for construction, for example. They are unintended consequences. It's not what they've set out to do, but it's something that has significantly impacted those local people that were originally living there before the TNC sort of set up shop or decided to go to that particular area. So some of the key features of TNC. So previously, countries may have borrowed money or capital from institutions such as the World Bank with high interest rates. TNCs allow a lot of these countries to develop through improvements to infrastructure, so transport, electricity, the internet. Okay. Previously, countries would have borrowed money with very high interest rates, so they'd have paid a lot of money back. They don't necessarily have to do this because the TNC are coming in and they're saying, actually, we will improve transport. It benefits you and it benefits us as well. So we will invest in that infrastructure for you. So it takes that pressure a little bit off of the government. Nowadays, the bulk of investment likely comes from TNCs who are aiming to develop key projects, but this often comes at a cost. And it's important when we think about cost, not to just think about the economic cost. Yes, that is important, but we also need to think about sort of social, economic, environmental, and political costs. Okay, in many cases, and again, this is something you need to be critical about. In many cases, TNCs will have some leniency from government and the authorities to set up there. Okay, you want to set up your TNC here, you want to set up your headquarters here, that's fine, we'll give you tax relief. Or we will overlook to an extent the high levels of pollution that you are emitting because you're contributing to our GDP. So again, it's kind of this almost balance that we need to get, or TNCs and governments need to strike between helping people and also kind of helping themselves. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about this kind of cost element here. TNCs often will exploit raw materials, labour, cheap labour, or environmental regulations without thinking of local people or the environment. Okay, TNCs operate in multiple different countries. They will only have their headquarters and their shareholders in a handful of countries. So they're not thinking of the bigger long-term picture in terms of sustainability for that area. They're just thinking about their own needs. So they'll come in and exploit raw materials. So it might be that there's a particular energy source that they don't have in their host country, but an emerging or a developing country may well have good access to. Again, labour. Often, labour will be cheap. It may be that workers don't have very many rights. It may be that there isn't a national legal minimum wage. And again, TNCs go in, well, in Britain, we've got to pay people this amount of money per hour legally. However, in this country, we can pay them whatever we want. Okay. And again, I've sort of spoken already a little bit about the environmental regulations, but also consider as well just establishing themselves as a TNC. They're establishing a headquarters, or they're establishing a factory or a manufacturing plant. There's still going to be things that, areas that need to be deforested or areas of land that need to be repurposed. Importantly, then, I want to talk about. I want to give you balance, and there are positives and negatives to TNCs, and it is very much about making an informed judgment. No TNC is necessarily going to be perfect. No TNC necessarily is going to have all disadvantages or all negatives. Okay, so importantly, thinking about this. So positives, they create a variety of jobs at different skill levels. Some TNCs will employ people, particularly sort of secondary, tertiary and quaternary industries, for example. It will also provide a source of income for poor people. Also training as well may be provided in order for people to kind of develop and move through within those institutions. Infrastructure is obviously improved for the benefit of the TNC, but that also then benefits people in the long term as well. Infrastructure is improved, road networks, public transport, internet connections. Yes, they benefit the TNC, but they also benefit local people as well. Investment will create more jobs and provide money to generate services. that leads to that positive multiplier effect. People are earning money, they go out, they spend it, it goes back into the local economy, it can be taxed, it can be regulated, and so on and so forth. And increased globalization through making places interconnected, bringing experts in, bringing in those people who can help make some form of difference to that area. We need people training in this element. Okay, we're going to bring someone in from another country who's really well trained at that. They're going to deliver the training, and that's then going to benefit people in the long term. Obviously, on the balance of that, then we need to look at negatives. So we've already mentioned it. TNCs exploit cheap labour and poor working conditions. They are ultimately a tool for profit. TNCs serve their shareholders, people who have an invested stake in them in terms of monetary value. So TNCs want to keep costs down as much as they possibly can. Now, an argument could be that the wages that they're being paid from those TNCs are higher than they might be being paid otherwise. Does that necessarily make it right? That's the moral question you've kind of got to ask yourselves and be critical of. It may receive tax breaks, so there's limited investment into the local area. There are a whole range of countries and a whole range of TNCs that have had agreements in the past with governments and organisations. The first 2-3 years, they're not paying any tax. So they're not massively contributing financially to that country's GDP, as it were. They can be footloose. They can at any point, because it's not the headquarters, they can at any point go, we've done what we need to do here, we're off, we're gone. Okay, and that creates a whole plethora of issues for local people because that's their income gone. That's the maintenance of key roads and key services, again, that isn't quite working and operating as it should. Large profits are often sent back to the country of origin. Limited profits may be spent in the host country. So again, that's talking about... let's take, I know I've used them already as an example. Let's take Shell, for example. Headquarters in the Netherlands, so most of their profits go back to the Netherlands and are spent there. Very few of their profits will be spent in the country where they are operating as a TNC. Okay, and air and water pollutions. Governments often can overlook this. You're contributing to our economy, therefore we're going to overlook the pollution that's going on. Okay, we're going to overlook that you're not quite meeting our environmental regulations. So that's ultimately TNCs in a little bit of a nutshell. Obviously, you can go away, do a little bit of research. You may have looked at in class a particular TNC, but you should be familiar with kind of the key terms of globalization and transnational cooperation, and thinking about how do they support in terms of development? How do they enable a country to progress and develop over time to improve quality of life for people? Give some examples of TNCs, and then again, discuss the positives and negatives of transnational corporations. Do you think they help or hinder development? In an exam, you are never going to get a question that has an answer to that. You're never going to receive a question that in the mark scheme says TNCs are positive or TNCs are overall negative. But it's about actually, can you bring balance to that discussion? And then following on from that, can you give reasons as to why you think they're positive or do you think they're negative? And you don't have to say they are 100% positive, they're 100% negative. It's about that discussion element and then bringing it back to an overall evaluative conclusion.